The courtroom packed and the proceedings fairly short as Keith Raniere appeared clad in a tan jumpsuit to face the charges against him. Outside of court, people saying they've been victims of Raniere speaking out. Keith Raniere refers to himself as the Vanguard and leads a cult that masquerades as a self-help group called NXIVM. He's now facing serious charges stemming from alleged actions within NXIVM.
Mr. Raniere denies these allegations.
Raniere's attorney speaking outside a federal court following the brief arraignment.
No one's ever heard the rest of the story and the other side of what's happened. I think this case is going to give us an opportunity to explain a lot more than the public has heard.
But Tony Natale has heard all she needs to. She dated Raniere back in the 90s.
That this is just the beginning of what needs to happen to stop this reign of terror.
She's not surprised he pled not guilty to the charges.
A sociopath, of course, he's going to maintain his innocence.
He doesn't have a moral compass. He doesn't know, he can't differentiate.
Not at all.
At all. He'll justify any abuse.
Catherine Oxenberg also speaking out.
He finally needs to be held accountable for every single woman and child that he's ever harmed, abused, exploited.
She says her daughter India is still deep within the control of Raniere and NXIVM. Natale recalling what Raniere told her the last time she saw him in the late 90s.
I will see you dead or in jail. So he got half of it right. He saw me again and I saw him, only he's in jail.
And Oxenberg making a continued plea for her daughter's safety.
I love you, come home.
Raniere did not apply for bail, so he will remain behind bars for now. A preliminary hearing has been scheduled for April 27th. Keith Raniere and his attorneys have spent the last week arguing why Raniere should be released on bail. The judge today saying that Raniere is a flight risk and also saying that the idea of armed guards keeping an eye on him is absurd. Keith Raniere denied bail in court today, but Allison Mack leaving the court to return to California under house arrest. Allison, did you help brand India Oxenberg? India's mother, Catherine Oxenberg, talking to me outside of court, saying her daughter is not in her right mind.
Allison Mack was my daughter's direct superior in NXIVM, and so she deserves to be held accountable for what she's done.
Saying she's relieved Raniere is remaining behind bars. Tony Natale, Raniere's ex-girlfriend, says people were living in fear that he could be released.
There's a lot of wealth and there's a lot of power.
The money that was offered up for bail was $10 million from an unnamed third party put into a trust at the time of Raniere's arrest. Frank Parlato, a former NXIVM publicist, says he knows exactly whose money it is.
Keith Raniere's been operating a very dangerous criminal enterprise with his partner, Claire Brofman.
Brofman is an heiress to Seagrams, and Parlato suspects the next to face charges.
She is a co-conspirator.
But Raniere's lawyers say they are unaware of Brofman's involvement, if any.
I haven't.
Does the lawyer represent Claire Brofman?
No, the lawyer represents, there's a trustee who does not represent Claire, who's a trustee of the trust.
So Claire's not involved in this at all, in this money?
I'm not going to discuss Claire's involvement.
Raniere's lawyers obviously not wanting to give me a straight answer there. They do say, however, that he will be applying for bail again. Allison Mack also apparently still in plea negotiations. The pair will appear again in court on July 25th. The people in this superseding indictment that joined NXIVM leader Keith Raniere as well as Smallville actress Allison Mack are now being called part of the inner circle of NXIVM. Raniere is said to be the leader of the group and Mack a top master in a sex slave cult within NXIVM called DOS. Now other top members are facing federal charges as well. Arrested on Tuesday, Nancy Salzman, the co-founder and president of NXIVM, as well as her daughter Lauren Salzman, who is said to be at the top tier of DOS along with Mack. Then there's Kathy Russell, who is being referred to as the bookkeeper for NXIVM. The Salzmans and Russell appeared in the Northern District Federal Court on Tuesday afternoon. Nancy's bail was set at $5 million and her daughter's bail was set at the same. Both are required to be at Wednesday's scheduled hearing at 2 p.m. in Brooklyn. Russell's bail was set at $25,000 and she is awaiting an identity hearing on Friday in Albany. Meanwhile, the alleged financial backer of the operation and Seagram's heiress Claire Brofman was also indicted in Brooklyn on Tuesday. I'll be at that hearing today in Brooklyn at 2 p.m. and the Salzmans as well as Keith Raniere and Allison Mack will be required to be there as well. This is the first time we're seeing what's being called NXIVM's inner circle in a room all together since this all began. The Vanguard and leader of the group, Keith Raniere, as well as Smallville actress Allison Mack, were joined by NXIVM prefect and president Nancy Salzman. You co-founded this group, Nancy. I mean, you helped start all of this. Is there anything you'd like to say to the people who you've hurt? as well as alleged financial backer and Seagram's heiress Claire Bronfman. Claire, you've allegedly funded this entire operation. Anything to say? The superseding indictment brought federal racketeering charges against this inner circle. And any more thoughts on a plea deal now that there have been more arrests in this case? The prosecution team saying they have around 60 electronic devices to weed through before beginning trial. Ranieri's lawyers say he remains confident in his innocence.
We feel really good, I think, and so does Keith. And we were just talking about this yesterday and today, how good our client feels, how good we feel about where we're at right now.
They also say more people have been helped by Ranieri's groups than hurt, having strong words for those who are against him.
They're crazy.
They're wrong.
That's my answer.
And there aren't that many.
But those who say they've been hurt by NXIVM say this is headed in the right direction, but far from over. Oh, you've been a long time waiting for this.
Vindication is coming.
Relief.
Yes.
Salzman, Mack, and Bronfman are all out on bail as Ranieri remains behind bars. Another court appearance was scheduled for September 13th with a tentative trial date set for January 7th. The judge asking Nancy Salzman to describe in her own words the crime that she was pleading guilty to. She got choked up at one point, saying she's done a lot of soul searching and took a lot of time to get to the place she was in today. It was a much different demeanor than she had with me outside of court. Nancy, are you prepared to testify against your daughter? Nancy, is it possible that you're guilty and no one else is? Nancy Salzman pleading guilty to one count of racketeering conspiracy in Brooklyn federal court on Wednesday. This count including 2 acts: conspiracy to commit identity theft and altering evidence. Salzman explaining to the judge that she helped in computer hacking to garner the usernames and passwords of anti-NXIVM people and survey their email accounts. Additionally, she says she altered video of NXIVM teachings in a civil case in New Jersey. Salzman saying in court she thought they were doing good at the time. She also said she is deeply sorry for the trouble she brought to her daughter, who is also facing charges in this case. The judge saying the maximum sentence for this charge is 20 years in prison, but the guidelines laying out an estimate of between 33 and 41 months. Salzman says she is ready to begin to atone for what she's done. It is important to note that Salzman's guilty plea comes with no obligation to cooperate or to testify in favor of the prosecution. While John Keith Ranieri will no longer have his inner circle sitting beside him as he faces his trial beginning tomorrow morning here in Eastern District Federal Court, 5 other defendants who have been charged in this NXIVM case have already pleaded guilty to their roles. I spoke to Ranieri's attorney just a little while ago, who tells me his client is in good spirits. Ranieri's attorney Mark Agnifilo looking ahead to the NXIVM trial beginning on Tuesday in Eastern District Federal Court.
It's a very interesting trial. I think the evidence will be somewhat different than the way the government's portrayed Keith in the press.
Ranieri is accused of running a secret society within his company NXIVM called DOS. Members of DOS are said to have been branded with Ranieri's initials and subjected to extreme lifestyles, including restricted diets. Prosecutors allege that NXIVM, based in the capital region, also trafficked women for sex. Agnifilo saying they've waited more than a year for this trial.
We've been trying to get this case to trial for many, many months, and now we're going to get the trial we've been asking for.
5 members of Ranieri's inner circle charged as well have already accepted guilty pleas. All the other defendants have pled guilty. Is it possible that they are all guilty and Keith is not?
It's also possible that they didn't want to deal with the ramifications of going to trial, and Keith does.
No word yet on if those defendants will testify against Ranieri.
We don't have a witness list. We've asked for a witness list, and they haven't given us a witness list.
Or if Ranieri himself will take the stand.
Tends to follow his lawyer's advice, so it's a decision we make together.
The jury consists of 8 men and 4 women, and that trial will begin tomorrow morning here in Eastern District Federal Court. I will be inside the courthouse for that, and we'll bring you updates on air and online. Hi, Lydia and John. I just came out from the courtroom moments ago where testimony for today was just wrapping up. Earlier this morning, we heard opening statements from Assistant U.S. Attorney Tanya Hajar and Ranieri's defense attorney Mark Agnifilo. Now, there was the first prosecution witness on the stand when we broke for the end of the day today. She was being examined by Assistant U.S. Attorney Maura Penza. Now, that witness was referred to just by her first name as Sylvie Sylvie, and she was finishing up her testimony today, talking about how she did eventually become a member of the secret society within NXIVM called DOS. Now, the first part of her testimony before lunch is much of a mystery to some of the media because of a technology breakdown with the microphone. We could not hear her in the overflow room. However, that was fixed by after the lunch break, and then the witness discussed NXIVM intensives, her relationships with Keith Raniere, Claire Bronfman, and others within that inner circle of NXIVM. Now, she's from the UK, and there was lots of testimony on her visas. She was traveling between England, Clifton Park, Canada, other parts of the United States, including right here in New York City. There was also a lot of testimony about her weight and eating disorders she struggled with, extreme exercise, with daily reports to both Raniere and Bronfman about her caloric intake and those extreme exercises. She also talked about different classes within NXIVM. We've mentioned this to you, our viewers, before. Those focus specifically on women classes, men classes, exploring emotions, things of that nature. Just in the first day of trial here in Brooklyn Federal Court, in the trial against Keith Raniere and his connection to NXIVM, we have seen opening statements, the first witness, and a filing for a mistrial.
We're not commenting.
Why not?
You're filing a motion for mistrial today?
A motion's been filed.
It has been filed. Thank you.
That was Keith Raniere's defense attorney, Mark Agnifilo, giving us a no comment on the filing of that mistrial just after testimony wrapped up today. Of course, the first day began with both the prosecution and the defense giving their opening statements, and then the very first witness took the stand. She was referred to as just Sylvie, her first name, which was something Agnifilo raised issue with and something he says is part of why he filed that mistrial. Sylvie did talk about her involvement with NXIVM and also the secret master slave society within NXIVM called DOS, as well as her relationships with Keith Raniere, Claire Bronfman, Nancy Salzman, and others within that inner circle. NXIVM insider Frank Parlato giving his quick take on the proceedings so far.
It became quite clear to me that this was not at all surprising, but this was part of their modus operandi.
Obviously, a lot to unpack from this first day of trial. We'll be back here tomorrow morning as the proceedings start again to figure out what's going to happen with that filing for a mistrial. Hi, John. Well, you mentioned that filing for a mistrial from yesterday. Obviously, that was the first thing the judge addressed right off the bat, and he denied that motion. We then moved on and continued hearing from that first witness on the stand, who is a former DOS member herself. We moved on to cross-examination done by Keith Raniere's attorney, Mark Agnifilo. Most of this was focused on her financial debt to Claire Bronfman, the teachings of NXIVM, and a very heavy focus on some messages back and forth between her and Raniere. Now, the defense showed these messages along with naked photos that the witness took of herself and sent to Raniere. Now, she also testified that after DOS was covered in the media, specifically that New York Times article that really broke this story through, they were asked to stop using titles in their messages, including Grandmaster, Master, and Slave. Now, some of our viewers may be wondering why any woman would subject themselves to this and why they would not just walk away from the situation or simply say no to these requests. Former NXIVM member Barbara Boucher giving some insight into this just after court.
As a woman, there's a certain sisterhood that we women share. There's a symbiotic meaning, and you can't imagine that these fellow women who are sharing your dream and purpose could be behind your back betraying you.
Now, we did finish up with that first witness and moved on to the second prosecution witness, who is Mark Vicente. He's a filmmaker and also a former NXIVM member. When we left the testimony today, he was giving a rundown of NXIVM and the organizations that were under NXIVM, and he explained that NXIVM functioned as an umbrella over all of these other organizations. So that testimony picks up again here in Brooklyn Federal Court tomorrow morning.